Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes, co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project. And Pat, been a bit of a rough week for a tiny dancer with the cases involving alleged police misconduct, with the disclosure of his trip to Cuba. He didn't like that. You know, this is his private family time. Nobody's supposed to know about this stuff. I think, as we had one texter from the morning show I do suggest this week, they were a little concerned. He was concerned that people were going to realize that he planned to defect to Cuba.
I wish he would.
Yeah, that would be nice. I didn't want to get pictures of him hanging out with the Castro brothers. But there's also these other financial problems. Remember those financial problems that the city of Chicago, one of the worst run cities in the country, if you assess it financially. You've got a junk-producing Chicago public school system where you have a teachers' strike vote this week, Wednesday, and you know how that's going to go. And then you just have the debt burden on Chicago families ever increasing, big property tax increase. And despite that, we know that those tax increases don't keep up with the rolling unfunded obligations piling up.
Yeah, and it's directly related to the governance of Mayor Emanuel. He is finally under the pressure, as we talked about in the last segment, finally under the pressure that he should be under. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
For more specifics on this, we're now joined by Sheila Weinberg, who's the founder of Truth in Accounting. That's a nonpartisan think tank that just tries to, kind of Joe Friday it. Here's just the facts of the financial picture for these cities. They've just recently released a financial state of the cities report for the 10 cities, the top 10 cities in the country, largest cities in the country. Sheila, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Dan. Well, you actually have an exclusive because we're releasing early next week, I think on Tuesday. So,
well, thank you very much. We're happy to be ahead of the learning curve. And so, in terms of your assessment of the city of Chicago and in the context of major urban centers in the nation, give us the financial picture of Chicago, both just kind of in a vacuum as well as in comparison to New York and LA and the rest.
Well, the bad news is that, each taxpayer would have to send $28,600 to City Hall to clean up the current outstanding bills, including the pensions and retiree health care benefits that they've promised and not set any money aside. The good news is we're not even close to being as bad as New York. Their per taxpayer, what we call burden, is $59,000 per taxpayer.
Hey, Sheila, it's Pat Hughes. Thanks so much for joining us. Every time I see a list, whether it's Illinois or the city of Chicago, we are always way down on it. And I'm wondering, you mentioned New York and obviously Chicago. These are two great world cities, great American cities. What is the thing about how we do business in Chicago, how New York does business, how some of these other cities on the list do business that has put us into this predicament? And what can we do or what should be done to get us out of this mess?
Well, the big thing is, we believe that you have not been doing, obviously, truthful accounting. This Illinois requires the city of Chicago to balance its budget, so it should not be in debt at all, but it's $25 billion in debt. And the reason for that, since they are allowed to use what I call political math to calculate the budgets, they have chosen to not include the proper pension and retiree health care expense in the budget. So the employees have earned the benefits, the city has incurred the liability, but they have not been funding them.
So I'm looking at your numbers, Truth in Accounting, truthinaccounting.org. City has about $32 billion in assets, and it's got about $32 billion in liability. So why don't we just liquidate everything and call it a day?
Well, these are past bills. These are bills that have already been incurred by past taxpayers. And the assets are assets of the of the city that should be held in trust for future taxpayers. yeah, you could liquidate everything, but I don't know how much people would pay for things these days. But we would not recommend you getting rid of us accountants have a thing where you should not get rid of long-term assets to pay current bills.
Sheila, I'm looking at the list, and San Antonio is the one big city that's at the top. In other words, more positive results. What do we know about the policies that are enacted in the cities that are doing much better versus the policies that are enacted here in Chicago and perhaps New York that make the differential between the cities that are performing better economically and on their accounting books and those that are not?
Well, again, we find that they do their accounting the same way, but the cities like San Antonio, they go ahead and when they this crazy notion of when you promise people something and you incur a liability, they actually have been funding their pensions and retiree health care benefits instead of hiding those from the public in the budget process and on the financial statements.
And just the bottom line, the big ticket here, whether you're talking about the city of Chicago, some of these other cities, or the state of Illinois, the big deal is pensions and unfunded pension liabilities, unfunded healthcare liabilities. It all comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yes, like San Antonio has, I hate to say, $1 million is little money, but they have less than $1 million in pensions and less than $1 million in retiree health care. A future lesson that can be learned from New York is that New York actually, Chicago has very little, only quote a billion, I hate to say is little, unfunded retiree health care benefits. New York has over $100 billion of those. Well, I'm sorry, $73 billion of those. So, one thing to watch for is as they're debating these pensions and trying to get them adjusted, sometimes they'll go, okay, well, we'll adjust the pensions, but we will increase your retiree health care benefits. So that's something to be careful of.
All right. She is Sheila Weinberg. She's the founder of Truth in Accounting, truthinaccounting.org. Go to their website this week to check out their report on the major cities in our nation, including Chicago. Sheila, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.